cancer, but we found out he can get radiated for it. So we were really happy.
Okay, good. So he can be treated.
Exactly. We thought it was going to be like a couple more months left with him, and now they said we'll have at least a year.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I see some new names tonight. Let's see, Cindy and Rolla and Clifford, Angie. Would anyone like to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what's the reason for visiting us tonight and your interest in the topic?
Yeah, I just like to hear like-minded people having thoughtful discussions. And that's the reason I'm joining.
Yeah, same here. I think the subject is so interesting, and I am so I want to hear more about it. Thank you.
Well, you all are in a good community, so I hope you enjoy today. Would anyone else like to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about how you feel about altruism?
Same reason as well that I joined this evening, actually, to get a different perspective, to hear, what other people are saying about this topic.
That's great.
So who's going to be the lead in this meeting?
Garrett is here, I think. Would you like to say hello? He's not, his mic is not on yet.
I see.
He will be starting at 7. Now we're just kind of getting to know each other and doing introductions. Anyone's welcome to jump in.
I'll be on video in 1 second. Sorry, just grabbing some drink.
There we go. Yeah, we first have to define what we mean by altruism. I would use the word altruism to mean the complete and utter absence of the sense of self, the I, the self, the mind. So when the brain is totally free, then we can say altruism is happening.
We'll get into the definitions of altruism. There are 2, and that's not one that I'm aware of. So if you want to bring a dictionary definition of altruism that says that, Jacob, feel free to introduce that into the chat.
Well, the dictionary says unselfish. So the absence.
You were saying something, Oleg?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Hello?
Yeah, go
Yes,
ahead.
we're
Oleg.
here.
He retired after serving 37 years in the Navy SEAL. All very random. So I'll introduce myself as there's a void. Hi, DLJ, still in the UK, although I live in Malaysia. Garrett, thanks very much for the write-up. I did actually read it. I noticed 3 errors. So if I was your copy editor, I would help you out there, but I'm not altruistic enough to do it for free.
No problem. I'm okay with grammatical errors. Even spelling errors, I'm okay with. As long as you understood the content, that's what matters to me.
I did. The one I would pick up, there's the non-grammatical or typo one was the, I was thinking, well, your analysis of the Cambridge dictionary definition, because you seem to have added an always and only in there. So like it's always this and only that, which I'm not sure it actually says. So that's the only quibble I would have if I was your copy editor. But other than that, yeah, I got the message, so it was good. Well done.
Great.
Hi, Sean, wanted to say hello?
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Sean. I live in Maryland. Well, altruism do exist, however, under certain conditions or circumstances. Say, people doing volunteers, say someone retired, they use their free time to help others doing volunteer work. That's a type of altruism. As I said, that's under certain conditions, under circumstances. And also, say, during a war, someone maybe try to save his comrade and sacrifice their own life. So, however, I don't think altruism is unconditional. Not unconditional. It happens. A person just do everything for somebody else all the times. Probably not. It had to under certain condition or circumstances.
Thank you. John, you wanted to jump in? John, you wanted to say something?
You're on mute, John.
Yeah, it's me. Okay. Is altruism a type of personal philosophy or guided by, for example, in regular way of talking, when we say that I'm feeling altruistic today, ergo I am going to give $100 to a homeless person, right? This is what I think a lot of people mean when they say altruism, right? That is some sort of personal guided feeling that motivates some sort of action, right? But that's definitely not a good way, right? Like, for example, there is a huge homeless problem in San Francisco. We don't want, like, how do we solve these kind of problems or societal problems? It's not going to be personal, right? It should be, you know, a societal solution, right? I think that oftentimes a lot of people think that a lot of the social problems can be solved just because some, if people are more altruistic, this would just solve everything. That I often think that this is a cheat. This is not a good way to think about this issue. So societal issues should be solved by some sort of policy, societal policy, or some sort of systematic solution to solving these big problems in society. And I don't think altruism is a good framework to solve any problem that have any, that can solve societal issues. Like, talk about feeding the homeless, talking about global inequality. These are not something that can be solved by any single person, but we must have some societal policy in order to solve this. Yeah, anyways.
Thank you so much. Angie, you wanted to introduce yourself and say something? Or Garrett, you wanted to respond?
I just wanted to say Abe was not on mute. So Abe, if you did want to say something, just put your hand up. But we heard your audio without being on when you didn't have your hand up. So I guess I'm going to address the comment just made after I give the presentation, because I think it'll be pretty short, and so I'll come back to it. So Angie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to brush up. I was watching a short video presentation a few months ago. Somebody was interviewing Bill Nye, the science guy, asking if the government should be run by scientists, which presumably are rational people, right? Bill Nye answered no. He said that he worked with a lot of scientists, a lot of intelligent people, and he doesn't think that government should be run by scientists. And my take on his answer is because the government interest is in taking care of the society, which needs to have some kind of altruism intention in it. And to me, I associate altruism with religion, and I know I'm very biased on that, so I really have a negative connotation on the altruism. So that was my take on the answer why Bill Nye thinks that the government shouldn't be run by rational people or scientists. It's because there's a need to take care of people, which means it needs some aspect of altruism. Thanks.
Angie, do you think that rational people wouldn't be altruists? So there's some relationship between altruism and rational people?
Maybe my understanding of altruism is not well defined, but if altruism is based on the lack of self-interest and put all intention in the interest of others, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's not quite what altruism means, but we'll go into the definition when we get there. When I get into the presentation portion. Since we have a minute with people not having their hands up, I want to respond to there seem to be a couple of misunderstandings about what altruism is. The prior person said that societal systems should or I think forget exactly what he said. I tried to write it down, but societal.
Let me repeat, like the societal problem should be done by, should have a solution. Like any big issues that society, like global warming, poverty, these are not the responsibility of any single individuals. It must be there must be a societal solution. Like government must be part of the solution. That's what I'm saying. Like sometimes a lot of the people say, okay, like how do we solve the world problem? If only you fuckers like recycle more. Like the reason why we have this global problem, you're blaming it on the person, individuals, and not addressing the systematic issues. So, that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah.
Yeah, so I hear you. I think you're saying that societal problems should be solved systematically. You said not through altruism, but I would argue that those two aren't mutually exclusive, and you'll see what I mean in the definition when I go through the definitions. While altruism is altruism is more a description of the motives of someone acting. They're not a solution to societal problems themselves, and they're not intended to be by anyone that advocates for altruism, myself included. The question is whether or not someone's motives are either altruistic or ego driven, and it's really like you're either one or the other, and you kind of I guess I would have to see whether or not there's like room for in the middle, like between altruism and selfish. You're generally one or the other, I think, but we can have that in the conversation whether or not there's a middle ground there to be something in between. I don't think there actually is. I think you're either altruistic or selfish. It's one or the other, and if so, it's more about which one is better, and which one should we be doing. And I'm going to try to make an argument that altruism is in everybody's best interest, including the egotist, quite frankly. But I'll get to that in the presentation portion, which if anyone else wants to, yeah, Ali, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, when you were talking and I was hearing the other speaker, I think I was thinking about what if, I think someone can genuinely start off by having no expectations in return if the actual root definition of altruism is that you are helping people and you don't expect anything back in return. In fact, you don't want anything back in return, but that could change over the course of the service that you're giving, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, I don't really know anybody who would give up their time and time and services to help other people, whether it's volunteering work, whether it's helping a friend, whether it's helping somebody a stranger or whatever, you know, you're not going to give up your time without having some kind of benefit, even if it's something innate or internal. It doesn't have to be something tangible in your hand. Do you know what I mean? Like, anyway,
Yeah, I
guess that
totally
was
know what you mean, Ali. I'm going to address that in the presentation portion.
Okay.
There are two definitions of altruism. You're using the one that I think is totally useless, quite frankly. No offense. That's not a dig on you. It's a dig on the Cambridge Dictionary. Not that I should be digging the Cambridge Dictionary. They're rather more famous than me, but I think that their definition of altruism is not very good. And I'll explain why. Although I think DLJ has a good point that, you know, if you read their definition with a lot of charity and don't interpret it the way that you just did, then it can be useful and meaningful. But I would argue that most people read it the way that you just did and interpret it the way that you just did, Ali. And that's why I'll make the comments that I do about that definition. There is another definition, which is I think far more useful and a much better representation of what altruism is. With that said, I want to let David go. Good to see you, David.
Oh, hey, Garrett. Yeah, just 2 points I wanted to make is the idea of free riders. Any discussion of social responsibilities and mutual caring for each other in some sort of altruistic social circle, you have to also look at the problem of free riders, people who are quite happy to take the benefits but don't actually contribute the equal amount that other people do. That's so free riders is just something that should be addressed during our discussion this evening. And the second point I wanted to make is that altruism assumes free will. I think you have to assume free will in order to even have a discussion of altruism. So presumably people who believe altruism is a thing must also believe that free will is a thing. And I just wanted to raise that point.
Yeah, no, I don't think so, David. Theoretically, you could just say your being altruistic or egotistic was just how you were born. It wasn't your decision. And so you could just say the way you are is the way that you are, and there you have no control over it.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point, Garrett, actually. So I can't help but be an angel. I know, yeah. It's my programming. I wish I wasn't, but
according to you, I'm born to be an altruist. I have no choice in the matter. I think I choose to be an altruist, but we can agree to disagree on that one until we come back to free will another night, which we will.
But wait a second, Garrett. In order to be an altruist, is that really a definition of altruism? If you cannot help but do what you do, you know, in other words, I can't help but save somebody. I have no choice. Yeah. Is that really altruism?
It is actually. We'll go into the definitions, and
okay.
It actually is.
Great. All right.
So I'll read them from the dictionary itself. So Basil or Basil?
Yes.
You muted yourself there. Sorry, we can't hear you now. And I didn't know if it was Basil or Basil, but you're muted, Basil or Basil.
Okay.
There we go. Yep, now we can hear you. And feel free to correct me and tell me the right way to pronounce your name.
It's a good way to start, as you did, with definitions. It's a method that Socrates used in ancient times when he had a discussion with his students, because unless you pin down the definition, what you're talking about, you're really wasting your breath. So it's a good start to pin it down and say, this is the definition we're going to use in this discussion. And I hope you'll do that later on. And I think you did that in the initial statement, actually, the definition that you're going to subscribe to. So then the discussion makes sense. Otherwise, we could be talking about different things and think we're having a discussion, but it doesn't accomplish anything.
Which, by the way, happens probably in all of the
Let me finish, if just a minute.
Oh, sorry.
The thing that you stated, though, I disagree that you have altruism on one side and you have selfishness on the other side. I believe it's a spectrum. For most of us, it's a spectrum we're in, and some of us and all of us have a mixture of both altruism and selfishness. And sometimes people go to the extremes. This is something we should observe, that When we're talking about altruism and pessimism, we're talking about a spectrum of behaviors.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I guess all I would say is I agree with you that every individual decision, more or less, can be decided to be either altruistic, and to what extent is it altruistic, or selfish, or to what extent is it selfish. And I guess theoretically, now that you mention it and make me think hard about it, and I had a little bit of time for my subconscious to process it, I guess theoretically you could be right on the middle ground there, right? Like exactly equally benefiting yourself and others, is neither selfish nor altruistic. But so I guess all three are possible, but I would argue very rarely in real life do things fit in that middle ground. So I would argue that each individual decision is either one or the other, the vast majority of the time. And I will definitely start off with definitions. And the other thing I was going to say is that I think you're totally right about how important definitions are, especially in this conversation, because most of the time that people disagree about altruism, it's when they use different definitions. So it's very important that we start off with the same definition, because I only realized that after looking up the dictionary definitions of altruism, after having had a number of discussions on the topic. It's very easy to talk past each other, which we try not to do in the Freethinker Institute, but does still happen sometimes. And so definitions are a good way to ground ourselves. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. I'm going to put the document that I'm going to be sort of paraphrasing from in the chat. So people are welcome to follow along if they want. The first thing, actually, I'll share my screen as well if people want to see the screen. Someone went in and did some highlights. I really liked the highlights, so I left them. So thanks to Joe for doing that. We're going to talk about a couple of different definitions of altruism. The first of which is basically the principle or practice of unselfish concern for or devotion to the welfare of others, as opposed to egoism. And then we want to talk about what is selfish concern, because we're saying unselfish concern. So what would selfishness be? Selfishness is devoted to or caring only for oneself, concerned primarily with one's own interests, benefits, welfare, regardless of others. So basically ignoring the benefits of others in any significant way, and really focusing on yourself. So if you're not ignoring the benefits of others and your primary concern is benefiting others, that really is the bar for altruism in this dictionary.com definition. With definition one was the one that I chose that I felt like met the description of what made the most sense to discuss tonight. So the Cambridge Dictionary definition is the attitude of caring about others and doing acts that help them, although you do not get anything by doing these acts. And that's, you do not get anything. That means literally not even the feeling of satisfaction of having helped them, would be included in that. And for me, that I'm going to go into a little bit later, like that definition is not very useful, because it basically says you need to help others without even feeling good about helping them. And as soon as you feel good about helping them, you're no longer an altruist, which is more or less a tautologically impossible definition to meet from my perspective. And so, oh, by the way, I didn't do the intro notes, so I apologize for that. So let me start with so let me back up a minute and introduce myself and the organization. So first of all, thanks everybody for coming tonight. My name is Garrett Lang. I'm a software developer turned software inventor, and I'm now an entrepreneur. My hobby is writing and discussing practical philosophy, and I'm also the executive director of the Freethinker Institute, which is the organization that brought to you tonight's event. We advertise in a lot of meetup groups, but we have these events every Tuesday evening. The FTI is basically focused on helping members be the best version of themselves, to seek truth and to be fair through transformational personal and professional development. These events are every Tuesday evening, covering a wide range of topics, typically not covered in academia or industry. We also have weekly members-only events to apply practical wisdom into our daily lives as a small community of sort of small groups of people who become friends and get to know each other really well and help become accountability partners for each other. We have only one rule in the FTI, and I would ask everyone to maintain that rule tonight. If you don't, then you will be warned. People who don't listen to the warning get removed from the session. And that is to be polite. We don't have many people get removed very often, but it is important to remain polite, because that's what keeps people's minds open to your ideas. And, you know, if you're rude to someone, they're not likely to be very open or receptive to your thoughts. And so we want to keep everyone polite so that we're all remaining in the critical thinking part of the brain, which is the cerebellum. The emotional and reptilian parts of the brain are the other two parts that are not usually very reasonable or rational, and usually incline us to do things that are not in our long-term best interest, is the polite way of putting it. So we want to keep things reason focused. And so I also would strongly encourage people, when you think someone is wrong, rather than trying to prove them wrong, let's ask them why they came to their conclusions instead. We call that listening to understand in the Freethinker Institute, where you know, we try to empathize with someone and understand why they came to the conclusions that they did, rather than explain to them why they're wrong. And so that said, I'm basically going to argue that you know, altruism is a real thing, and it is possible to be an altruist. And in fact, it's not only possible, I would argue that a lot of us are altruists, a lot more than you might think, and that altruism is a winning strategy in life, even for the egotist. Quite frankly, I'm going to make that bold claim, and I've told that to one egotist and given him my argument, and he actually agreed with that. It's a more recent argument that I've made, but I welcome people thinking about that argument with critical thinking skills, and tell me if you can find a flaw to my argument. And that said, I guess I'm going to go ahead and ask, I guess, general guidelines is, you know, as people are asking questions, you know, save questions until after the presentation portion. It won't be too long. And then when you ask questions or make comments, try to limit each comment or question to one comment or one question at a time per time that you raise your hand. And then after you ask your question or make your comment, then you know, you can drop your hand and put it back up again, and then jump right back into line. But that way we can keep the conversation moving, and we can talk about one comment or question thoroughly at a time. If you want to respond to something that someone just said, just do the little party reaction, like under the bottom of your screen, you'll have a reactions option, and there's a little party thing that you can call out there. And then when you put a little party hat on, yep, Ellis just did it right there. And so you see a little party favor come up. And when you do that, it means you want to make a quick comment on something that someone just said. I like to, you know, interact with everybody that asks a question or makes a comment, so that people, you know, so that there's some interaction with them. But if other people want to interact with them, just put your little party hat on, and then we'll, you know, when I get the chance, I'll call on you. If I miss you, you're welcome to talk over me if I missed your party hat. That's just an accident. If I finished talking and started to move on to the next thing. So it's a little hard to keep track of everything in these Zoom sessions. There's a lot going on, and I tend to be focused on the conversation and not always noticing all the icons, but I'm going to try to get better at that. It's a new thing we're introducing, to do the party hats. So that said, I will get started, or get back into the presentation portion of the evening. And so basically, I'm going to, you know, first analyze the typical argument against altruism, which is that, you know, just what I described, if you're getting any benefit out of altruism, you know, according to the Cambridge Dictionary definition, then theoretically, you know, you're considered not being an altruist. But I would argue that that actually is not a very useful definition, because you know, like, it just doesn't make sense that people would even have any motive for doing something if they don't even get a positive inclination or feeling from doing something positive with someone. like pretty much all of us, if we do something nice for someone, we feel good about that. It's a pretty natural human emotion to feel good about doing something nice for another person. And so saying that that doesn't even count as altruism basically makes that definition of altruism impossible to meet, which means that it's not very useful. So if you talk about benefiting other people, more than yourself, there are a great deal of people that make decisions on a regular basis that do things that benefit other people more often than themselves. And I would argue that that is really, as long as the benefits of the receiver of the help outweigh the benefits of the giver, then that basically says that that person is an altruist because they're benefiting other people more than their own selfishness would imply. So if they're benefiting others more than themselves. So that's basically the logical argument there. So basically, the other question, when I wrote this essay, it was about not only whether or not altruists exist, but how do you be a good altruist? And what I mean by good is not good as in doing good, but an effective altruist, different than the effective altruism movement. I guess I shouldn't use that word, but how do you be a sustainable altruist? Because I know a lot of people that were altruists and gave to others who never gave anything back to them, didn't even appreciate the help. And they kept giving and giving, and then eventually they burned out. They were like, look, I just can't keep giving to people who don't even appreciate the giving that I'm giving them. And I would argue that's not being a sustainable altruist is probably what I should call it. And so basically continuing to give to someone who doesn't even appreciate your help, I would argue is sort of rewarding bad behavior. You're essentially choosing to continue to give to someone who doesn't even express that they appreciated your help. Now, if someone can give back to you and does, if they can give back to you and does, then for me, that prioritizes me giving more to them than, the hundreds of other people that I regularly interact with. And if you interact with a large number of people and you give to a large number of those people, some of them will give back to you, some of them will appreciate you, and some of them won't do either. And, we're all limited in how much time and effort we have to give to others, by the practical realities of the fact that we're only awake for how many hours of the day. For me, it's about 16 because I like 8 hours of sleep. And everyone should get 8 hours of sleep, quite frankly, according to sleep experts. And so, except short sleepers are like less than 5% of the population and can do with 5 to 6 hours a night. But basically, we're all limited in the amount of time and money we have and resources that we have. And so what I would argue is that if we're helping enough people and we're meeting enough people, then we're limited in who the people we can continue to help are. And when we're limited in that way, we should be choosing to give back to at least people who appreciate the help and giving more back to people who actually help us back. Because when someone gives to us, they actually, if they give to us in most ways that someone can give to us or help us, they actually increase our sphere of influence. And in helping increase our sphere of influence, we then become more capable of giving back to them. And if they then help us back, and if we then use that increased sphere of influence to help them, then they help us back. You see, that's a reciprocal sort of growing the pie sort of relationship where it's reciprocal help. And, for me, that's what I think the sustainable altruist would engage in, rather than just helping people who there's no benefit for. And so that's basically what I would argue is and if you don't have enough people that, if you have more time and resources than people who help you back, then the next priority is to help the people who at least appreciate your help. And at least they've shown an appreciation for your help. I would argue we should not help back people who don't even appreciate our help. They may not even want us to be helping them, right? Because a lot of people say, hey, I'm good. I've asked people, oh, would you like some feedback? and sometimes they go, you know what? No, I don't want feedback. And it's like, all right, then I won't give you feedback. And, I always like to ask first, which is I gave a talk on giving and receiving feedback. And I always recommend asking people whether they're open to feedback, because if they're not open to it, why bother giving it to them? Now, my feedback might have been dead on in those cases that I wanted to give feedback, but I'm not going to give that person feedback if they're not open to it. That's just going to make them more annoyed with me and not be helpful to them at all and make them dislike me more. So there's really no benefit in giving someone feedback if they're not receptive to it in the first place. So, we shouldn't try to help people who don't want help. And that's why asking people if they want feedback is an important first step to giving someone feedback. I think I kind of covered this example. Clifford, I'm just going to wait for the question until the end of the presentation. It's not that much longer until I'm done. I'm almost at the end here. So if we talk about the benefits of altruism, if you're benefiting others, basically you're giving more to others than you're receiving. That's an act of trust. And basically, within most people, that builds trust. It's also an act of vulnerability, which also builds positive relationships. Studies have shown that the givers in society are actually the ones that rise to the top of most organizations. Now, not all people who rise to the top are givers, but most leaders, most senior leaders in organizations are more givers than they are takers. And I think Give and Take was the book by Adam Grant that I learned that from studies done on givers and takers, and people who are exchangers. Having a lot of people that you trust in life, where giving to other people helps create trust, creates a network of friends and relationships that you can rely on. And actually, the number of friends and relationships that you can rely on and positive relationships you have in life is key to longevity. It's actually, loneliness is more harmful to the body than smoking, which is something we talked about another night. And so having a lot of positive relationships is really important. And altruism can help you have more positive relationships in life. That creates a network of people that can help you with your goals, which is one of the things we do as members of the Freethinker Institute. We split up into groups of 10 or fewer, and we create meaningful relationships within those groups we call pods, and we help each other achieve our goals, and we help give, suggestions for improvement and how to be the best version of ourselves. And so that's a way of yes, we're all helping each other. And I have a saying, which is, if we don't help each other, who's going to help us? And when you put it that way, it seems so obvious that, gosh, we really have to help each other, because if we never help each other, we're never going to get help ourselves. And that's very true. So that's one of the things that we try to do in the FTI membership group for anyone interested in it. Ellis is going to post a Google Doc to learn more about membership for anyone interested in learning about that. There's also more strength and influence in a group of people working together, which is part of what the membership tries to do, rather than an individual acting on their own, which the person saying that they don't think that altruism is a good solution to society's problems mentioned the fact that altruism is an individual being altruistic, but a lot of society's problems are societal problems. Well, that's true, but society is made up of individuals. And actually, even if you take government action, it's all voted on by individuals. And the question is whether or not those individuals' motives are altruistic or whether they're selfish. If you have a bunch of politicians whose goals are to be selfish, they're going to vote for tax breaks for the wealthiest people, which they are usually among, because it takes a lot of money to get into politics most of the time. Although there are a few exceptions. There was a guy that ran up a huge credit card debt to get elected to Congress. I think it was in the last election season. I found that to be a pretty fascinating story. The guy was like completely bankrupt when he got his job, because he went into like a huge amount of credit card debt to get elected to a political office, which is a pretty interesting level of motivation to become a politician. And what he does when he's in office will determine whether that was something that we should say was a good thing for society or a bad one. And then the other thing is, noting that being an altruist creates stronger relationships is where I would come to why altruism is actually the most successful winning strategy for the egotist, because the egotist wants to help themselves, right? But the truth is, by helping others, you create a network of people who are more likely to help you, and therefore you actually end up having a much higher positive influence on your own life, rather than the selfish person who only helps themselves quickly finds themselves not having a big support network or a large group of friends because everyone recognizes that they're being selfish. And so you don't have as many friends of quite as good of a caliber by being a selfish person as you would by being an altruist. So I would argue being an altruist is even to the benefit of a selfish person, or of an egotistical person who wants to just help themselves and puts themselves first. Helping others is actually a better way of helping yourself often than just helping yourself directly. So I'm going to make that argument. And then the last thing I'll make is to say that altruism actually, this is the argument about stronger relationships lead to a healthier life. So that's in the article that was posted, or the essay that was posted, for anyone that wants to read it. And so that said, Clifford had his hand up for a long time, so I want to let him go first if he still had something he wanted to say. And I'm going to go back on to
Sorry. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat. I have a couple of comments essentially about your presentation. Good presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
My comments, relates to there are two components, I'd like to actually I would like to expand on. Is the first one being when we're talking about altruism, are we referring to essentially, I think, if I give an example, that will be clearer. Let's say that, you're helping your friends. If you're helping your friends, strictly speaking, and not helping, any other people out of your circle, would that be considered being altruist?
Yes, because there are other people other than you. Selfish just means you're helping yourself first and foremost. So even if you're helping people in your inner circle, even if it's your family, it's still considered altruistic because you're not helping primarily or exclusively, depending on your definition, yourself. If you're helping other people first and foremost, and the act you're doing, like the decision you make, helps others more than it helps yourself, then that's altruistic, according to the dictionary.com definition, not the Cambridge one, which again, I threw that one out because I didn't think it was worth talking about. I think there are, to DLJ's point, there are ways to interpret that are more charitable, but the way that most of the conversations I've had about altruism go, most people are interpreting it the way that I wrote about in the essay.
Right. It seems to me like, it's more, there is a utilitarian approach, in your definition.
There is.
Of altruism.
There's a utilitarian bent to altruism in general, quite frankly. But utilitarianism goes a little further than altruism because, it basically is looking for the greatest good of the greatest number. And altruism just says you're helping other people, and it doesn't say you have to help other people, to maximize the amount of happiness that other people have or minimize the amount of harm that other people sustain. It's just saying you're helping other people before yourself. And the truth is, you can be a utilitarian and help yourself the most first, because if helping yourself the most first is what increases happiness and decreases harm the most, then that's still utilitarian, but not necessarily altruistic.
Right. And this is where I think also the other component is when you take that aspect into the broader society itself, So the ramification may not be as positive as we may hope. Because if my acts consist of helping mostly my friends, for instance, to get better jobs, to get, to advance, in society. So essentially my inner circle is going to benefit, but the rest of the society would not.
Right. That's why, the Free Thinker Institute was founded to maximize happiness and minimize harm in the world, which is more utilitarianism. So I would argue altruism is too weak of an assertion to be super useful. I mean, it's useful in that, it's better than trying to vote into power or put into power people who are selfish, which I would argue is a really bad idea. But it's not nearly as good as putting into positions of power people who are altruists. So I think that's a great comparison, Clifford. Thanks for making it.
Thank you.
DLJ, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Radiant as ever. How are you?
Excellent.
Yes, so thank you for the write-up and the presentation.
Sure.
Got me thinking. So I'm trying to get my head around why we have a separate word, which is altruism, that might be different from, say, just simply acts of kindness or charity or sacrifice, right? So if we sort of tone it down and say helping others more than ourselves, is that not just covered by other things? I'm wondering. So should altruism be something a little bit stronger than that? In other words, like always helping somebody only to benefit others, that kind of thing, right? So the example that popped into my head, which may muddy the waters a bit, during the pandemic, a lot of countries offered assistance to their populace. Some countries offered assistance to companies, but that's another matter. But in the UK, for example, handouts, monthly payments to subsidize lost salary kind of thing, yes? My sister refused anything to herself on the grounds that other people need it more than she does. And for her, that's just an extension of her Marxism, right? So it's just the way she, yeah, basically the way she is, right? I don't know, does that, so in other words, because your write-up has it as that altruism, in your example, is a kind of one-to-one relationship, right? One subject, one object of the giving or the receiving, right? Agreed? Yeah, whereas what happens if we're giving to a wider group, or even in my sister's case, we're giving to people we never met and never going to meet?
Yeah, I think that it applies whether we meet the people or not. It's just about others versus us. That's where I would say, like, altruism is a very, it's a dichotomy, right? You're either selfish or you're altruistic, or you're like right on the middle between the two, where you're equally weighting your interests with other people's. But it doesn't give concern to like how much you know the other people or how close they are to you or any of that. It's just a matter of like other people versus us and ourselves. And it's really quite that simple. It's really just, do I only care about myself primarily, or do I care about someone other than myself as much or more than myself? And if you're doing the latter, then you are technically altruistic. I actually would argue that most people, I don't know, I mean, this is a bold claim, but my guess is that most people are altruistic, or at least a lot of people are altruistic and don't even realize that they are, because it's really not that big of a bar to hit, quite frankly.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it. John, go ahead.
It's not John, it's Mark. I don't know if I've been listening closely enough, but it seems to me that what you're saying is that to be altruistic is a good thing, because in doing so, there is in consciously acting in a deliberately altruistic manner, you reap rewards for that you should be desirous of, and therefore you should be altruistic in order to obtain the good outcome that it comes back on you. This is why it's good. This is why altruism is attractive, why it even exists. That's not how I think of that word at all. To me, altruism is just like if you have a natural disposition to be kind and to be generous and to be thoughtful and considerate, then you will do that, not because of I'm going to be considerate and kind and generous because I know that God will reward me, or that it'll come back to me one day, or whatever it might. This is my reasoning, or I'm a Marxist, whatever it is. No. That's not altruism. Is that altruism? And if it is, I mean, isn't there a difference between that kind of altruism and the kind that I'm talking about, a natural disposition to be kind, or to simply be giving? This can't just be a natural way of being without it having some intellectual grounding.
Yeah, I think it is a natural way of being for those of us that practice it. And I guess the reason that you probably don't think about it in the way that I put it forth is because I'm an inventor, and so I make up new perspectives on things. And I think this is a new way of looking at altruism. So far as I'm aware, if someone has seen this perspective put forward somewhere else, I would love references to it, and then I'll give them credit for it in my essay. But the idea that altruism is to the benefit of the egotist is something that I've never heard anyone else put forth before. So it's a different way of looking at altruism. And I would argue that while you're right, like, I think it's better to be an altruist from simply pure motives of wanting to do right by other people, I think it's good to recognize that being a sustainable altruist is also in our own best interest. And doing that will actually encourage more people to be altruists than are today. And I think that it's reality. I think it's true. And so that's why I'm putting it forth, because I think that everybody will benefit, both the people who are currently, selfish and change to be altruists will benefit, but so will all the people around them by having their friends turn into altruists.
All right. Can I say Mark Twain wrote an essay on altruism, and said there's no such thing as altruism. It's like a dialogue. And because people are being altruistic in order to benefit ultimately from it. So that idea has been put forward before, Mark Twain.
Well, that actually is the idea that I was saying is the version of altruism that I think is tautologically impossible to meet, and therefore I think not very intellectually interesting. He's putting forth the idea that I think is a misunderstanding of altruism, which is that, helping others, if I understood you right, he was saying that helping others is only done to further themselves, is not altruistic. And so that, I think, is a misunderstanding of altruism, rather than saying that altruism is a good thing and doing it actually benefits the self more than not. So his argument is essentially saying, don't be altruistic, or I don't want to go that far, but he's saying no one is an altruist because everybody benefits. What I'm saying is, everybody should be an altruist because everybody benefits by everyone being an altruist. So it's a little different, at least by my read. Jose, bienvenidos.
Your Spanish is improving.
It's been pretty good since the 90s, to be honest, but it's been better. It's been better in the last 6 years since my kids were born. I started speaking Spanish to them every day.
Good. That's when they learn. I just want to make a point here and use your example of Pat and Sam. And this point is a little conflicting and inconsistent. So let me start by saying the definition of altruism that you are advocating is one where Pat is doing an altruistic act if Sam shows gratitude or other words that you use there. If Sam, in fact, shows to be not very grateful and in fact almost aggressive, Pat does not provide any help to Sam, and Pat is being an altruistic action as well. That's the definition that you're advocating, put in one example. So I ask you this: we haven't discussed here that altruism depends on who the other person is, right?
Right.
Like
I would argue it doesn't depend on who the other person is. They could be anyone, as long as they're not yourself.
Okay. No, fair. So now I propose the following. Imagine that Pat is yourself and Sam is your daughter. and you claim that you're altruistic. Therefore, if your daughters are very young, but imagine that they're a little older or even adolescent, when you get some unforeseen reactions from adolescent, so you will be altruistic if you provide no help to her. That's the argument you're making.
I don't understand why you think that.
Yeah, because you said that if Sam is not grateful, Pat is still doing the altruistic thing by not offering any help. So I'm telling you, just change the players. You and your daughter.
I think you're misunderstanding, or maybe I understand you're looking for a loophole, and I get that. And I wasn't saying that the person is still altruistic for not helping. What I was saying is, if we're given the choice of helping, 100 people, and 33 of them, are, or say 99 people, and 33 of them don't help us back, and say 2 of them are my kids, let's say they are, and say 33 of them are appreciative and 33 others, do help me back. I would be being altruistic if I continue to help the people who help me back, and not even my kids, for example. I would still be being altruistic. Now, I would argue I wouldn't be being a very good dad, because I should probably keep helping my kids. But there will come a point in time in my life where, if my kids are completely ungrateful of all that I've done for them in their lives, and they say, we don't appreciate you, and we're not going to show any appreciation for you, I may say, look, I'm going to focus my time and effort on other people. I don't think that makes me a bad person. It's just and I will still have a relationship with them and try to be, kind to them when I can interact with them, and when they give me their time, great. I don't think that's going to be the case, because we have a great relationship, although they're only 6. But I don't think that'll be the case, and I hope it won't be. But I don't think I would be a bad person to say that I'm not going to keep helping my kid. Now, right now, my kids are 6. They're very dependent on me, so it's a different story. But the truth is, they are very appreciative of me, even though they're 6. And I think that most people are naturally appreciative of those who help us. And it's only, through egotism that we stop appreciating people who help us, where we say, I got this, and I don't care that someone helped me, and I'm too good for their help, that we say, screw you for helping me, right? What kind of message is that to send to someone who tried to help you, even if they're wrong? Say, hey, thanks for trying to help me. I appreciate the effort, right? And doesn't mean we have to agree, but you can at least be appreciative of someone's effort. Does that make sense, Jose?
Yeah, I follow your logic. I only would like to offer a slightly different, not different, but another point of view that says when somebody actually needs your help and rejects your help is when they need the help the most. So all I'm saying is, if I'm going to base my altruism only on the basis of somebody showing some gratitude, I'm being a little bit selfish, because I'm starting to see that, oh, okay, so if this person doesn't appreciate my help, the hell with him. Wait a second, maybe that is the main reason why this person needs help. And if you look at the therapists in general, you will hear the stories, and forget if it's paid or not. You will hear the stories that they all start with somebody, not they all, but most or many start with people that don't want to be there. But they were sent by their parents, they were sent by the employer. They don't want to be there. And those are the ones who need the help the most. So I would carve a little niche there that says maybe the person who is ungrateful and rejects the help is the person who needs it the most, and where you can shine as altruist.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I would argue that people who I would argue that we all have limited resources and limited amounts of time. And if someone is absolutely disagreeing with your feedback to them that will help them, and they're unappreciative of your feedback, you're not helping them, right? Because they're disagreeing with your feedback, and they're not going to do what you said because they disagreed with you. That person, you're not helping them. You may feel like your opinion is perfect and you have exactly what they need. But they said, nope, no thanks. You know, pound sand. You're not helping them, right? You can't help someone unless they let you help them. Even those people who go to a psychologist, you know, against their will, they have to eventually have an open mind or they don't get help. And I agree with you that those people are the ones that need the help the most. It's the egotists that need the most help, Jose. I agree with you. I have a saying, which is everybody deserves love and compassion. The ones that we think deserve it the least are the ones that need it the most. And I agree with you. Those are the people who need it the most. And I always try to help those people. But if they give me, you know, a lot of flack and they just attack me for trying to be helpful to them, then I'm like, all right, sorry if I had a bad, you know, sorry if I wasn't helpful. And, you know, I wish you all the best, you know, and I say, I wish you wisdom, and I move on to someone else. Because there are plenty of people that appreciate when I try to make an effort to help them. And I would much rather continue to help those people. And always, like, I leave the door open, and I usually will end saying, if you ever feel like things aren't going well for you, feel free to reach out to me in the future, and I'm happy to try to help, right? And I leave the door open because I know those people need the most help, but until they let their egotism down, they're not going to receive it. And so you're absolutely right, but, you know, a man, my dad likes to say, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And, you know, if someone's mind isn't open, they're not going to change it. And, you know, that's why intention number 2 of the Free Thinker Institute is to have an open mind. Because if you don't have an open mind, you never learn. And I feel bad for those people, but I can't help them unless they open their mind. So Kelly, go ahead.
You know, I don't think I ever engaged about this topic, you know, in this depth. So I quickly have to develop my thought processing. So we talked to many things. Then I think, you know, true altruism, ultimate altruism doesn't exist. That is my premise. Even though we are doing, you know, good things to our parents and, you know, children, but we have our interest and our, you know, kind of agenda. You know, why we are doing this? We are trying to fulfill and, you know, feeling good, as you said. So that's that. I think it is the ultimate altruistic, you know, behavior, you know, human deed. It's depend on personal, you know, measurement. Some people say on the scale of 1 to 10, if your intention is, you know, just very small, like, you know, 1 in the 10, you know, scale, is your intention was altruistic, you are trying to really help, that people were going to define their deed as, oh, I did something, you know, altruistic behavior today. Or some people say it gotta be at least more than 5, is others' interest is above yours. Then people were gonna define it, oh, I did something really good, you know, altruistic, you know, did. So I think it is my, you know, the personal judgment. So, you know, others shouldn't judge the other person's deed, you know, behavior. It is altruistic or not, you know, selfish. Usually we judge by the result. So we have to really consider what is their intention, regardless of the, you know, the result. Okay, you know, that's about it for now.
So I agree with you that we need to judge their intention regardless of the result. And altruism is all about intention. If your intention is to do right by other people first and foremost, and not about helping yourself to the maximum, then you are altruistic. And I would argue not all of us are always trying to do exactly what's best for us first and foremost all the time. And so we're all altruistic to some degree, as long as we're not always putting ourselves before absolutely everybody else, then we're all altruistic sometimes. So I'm curious, given that you say that it's about intention regardless of result, but you said true altruism doesn't exist. You know, given what I said about altruism in the presentation portion, what makes you skeptical that anyone, I think what you're essentially saying by saying that true altruism doesn't exist is you're saying absolutely every one of the 7 to 8 billion people on earth put themselves first in every single decision they make and never put another human being first. Is that your assertion, or is there a misunderstanding there?
That's not, what I meant. Even though you mentioned in your presentation, if there is no motivation, like feeling good, you want to do something good to society, your family. If we don't have that kind of motivation, then nobody will gonna do anything altruistic there. So I think every day we are doing is some intention, some motivation to feel good. And
Sure.
Because our ego as a human being, you cannot reduct ourselves, whatever we do. I don't think,
Right.
we
Right.
can truly 100% to, get rid of that.
So Kelly, I think what you're using is the Cambridge definition of altruism that I said I wasn't going to use for tonight's session. For tonight's session, we should use the dictionary.com definition, which just means putting other people's interests before our own. And if we talk about putting other people's interests before our own, I think there are a lot of examples you could probably find from your own life where you've done things that, like if you've ever been given the wrong change and you gave a little extra change back at, the grocery store, then you've done something altruistic, right? You gave them money back that you could have kept for yourself. The selfish thing would have been to keep the money for yourself. But if you said, oh, you gave me an extra $1 back, here's the extra $1, you just did something altruistic because you did something in someone else's interest that wasn't to your own, to your own selfish desires.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No. I mean, I cannot really say that because the few change doesn't really mean to me a lot, but the kind of feeling good is, it's much more. Again, my measurement, the few, cents or dollars, it's really trivial. It doesn't value anything. But feeling good values more. So that's why I did. So I cannot really argue that.
So if you're saying that the feeling of doing good for you always outweighs the benefit that you give other people, I mean, that's kind of assuming how much other people appreciate your help, right? You're assuming you always feel better about helping other people than they feel about the help you give them. Do you really think that no one appreciates your help even more than the good that you feel from helping them? Like your entire life, not once?
Okay, so I cannot use that kind of extreme word like always, yeah, but
Even the
not
vast
all the
majority of the
time.
time,
Yeah.
are you saying 90% of the time that you help other people, you think you get more out of it than they do?
Okay. I mean, how can I say? Again, this is my personal, everybody's personal, evaluation. So I think it's kind of, situational.
Yeah, it is
Situational and
situational.
circumstantial.
I think that there's a lot of shame given to people who call themselves altruists. And I'm bucking that shame tonight by calling myself an altruist. I'm saying I am an unabashed altruist. I put other people first all the time. And I can give lots of examples of this if people want it, but there's a lot of hands up, so I won't do it now. But I'd say there's nothing wrong with being an altruist. In fact, it's a low bar to be an altruist. Just to put other people before ourselves, it doesn't take a lot. I love helping other people. I get a lot of joy from that. But to me, the joy that I get from helping other people is it's a different measure than the benefit that I'm giving them. It's a different thing. And so I don't compare those as apples to apples because I'm getting the joy out of helping them, but they're getting the benefit of the help that I'm giving them. And so it's a little bit of a different thing. Like, I guess the joy from helping them wouldn't be there if I wasn't providing the act of helping them. So it's almost like a circular argument to say that you're getting more help from helping someone than you are from giving them help. Like you wouldn't even get that joy if you hadn't helped them. So, I guess it feels a little bit like a circular argument.
Okay.
Jan, go ahead.
Thank you, Garrett. Two thoughts. I think this is a great topic to discuss, but I think it's probably impossible to separate the good feelings that people get when we do an altruistic act from self-interest, because I think most of us know that it's likely to come back to us in some way. And I don't mean just some vague, good karma way, but unless there's something terribly wrong with the way we were raised, I think most of us know that it benefits us to be helpful and at least kind to others. And so I think when people act in a quote unquote altruistic way, they probably know, even if they don't think about it, that they're going to benefit. I don't, there's no way to prove that's not the case, because we really don't know. I don't think it's black or white why people do things. The other comment I wanted to make, I think it was Jose who said something about how people who, and Garrett, you may have agreed, people who need help often decline it. I think we get into some pretty murky territory there, because the assumption, which I'm going to question, is that the well-intentioned helper actually knows what is best for that person. They may indeed be struggling, but we don't know. We don't know what they need. You've got to know somebody pretty well to know what would be most helpful. And even then you can be wrong. So you can still have good intentions, but I think to say that if somebody won't accept your help, that's proof that they are indeed troubled. I think that's a little bit self-serving, and no offense, but I think it's a little bit egomaniacal to think that we can always decide what other people need. They may have a good reason, not a dysfunctional reason, to decline certain types of help, and we may not know.
Yeah, so two things there. Let's try to keep it to one for everybody, because I couldn't get to, I'm not going to get to everything, but
I was brief though, Garrett, wasn't I?
you were brief, but I couldn't take notes fast enough. So but yeah, I agree with your first point. Let me focus on I don't think it matters whether or not we separate the good feelings we get from helping other people versus otherwise. Like, I think what matters more is that we do help each other and that we encourage helping each other, because I think that we live in a better society if we're all helping each other, with kind intentions, and knowing that when someone else declines our help, we can politely suggest, hey, I think this would be helpful to you, but also to be willing to be unattached to them agreeing with our help. And that comes to your second point, Jan, is I don't think that I agree with you. We shouldn't make the assumption that that someone who declines help is always wrong to decline it. Like, a lot of people make suggestions that are, not good suggestions, right? So like, it's not always true that just because someone gives feedback that feedback is accurate or helpful to the person they're giving feedback to. But I would argue one of the tenets of the Free Thinker Institute is that we should each, come to the conclusion that we believe is right for ourselves, based on our own critical thinking skills. And so all I would say about that is, if you, Jan, give me feedback and you say, Garrett, this feedback would help you run a better event this evening, and I say, look, Jan, thanks for that feedback, but I'm not going to take it. That doesn't inherently mean that either one of us is right and wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion that you're right, and I'm entitled to my opinion that I'm wrong. And I would argue that, like, we can agree to disagree in that situation, right? And there probably is a right answer. Like, your feedback might make the session better or not, but that would need to be done by an objective third party that listens to both of our perspectives, takes everything into consideration and says, hey, Jan, I think that, answering every question in, extreme detail might create too many hands, which Garrett is doing right now. So maybe that's not a good solution. And so all I'm saying is that I agree with you that it's not always clear what the answer is and whether the feedback is good or not. But I would argue that we should all, hone our critical thinking skills so we can learn to rely on them. And it's okay to say, I think my feedback would have helped this person. And it's okay to believe that. It doesn't make you a bad person if you think that someone that was unreceptive to your feedback would have helped them. but it's also okay to say, you know what, they weren't ready to learn that feedback, so I'm going to back off and I'm not going to push it on them. I'm going to give it as a suggestion and they can take it or leave it. And that's where the second intention of having an open mind towards being the best version of yourself, seeking truth and being fair comes in. People who are part of the FTI and members of the FTI are always trying to do that so that we can grow and learn. And other people don't always want to do that. They give into egotism and they take a different path.
Garrett, is it appropriate for me to respond here briefly?
Yeah, you're welcome to.
Sure. I'm I'm fairly new here, so I see how the rhythm of this group works. I would say that however good one's intentions are, to think, well, this unwilling recipient or non-recipient of my feedback wasn't ready to hear it. I still think that's egotistical. Maybe,
So have you
maybe
never given feedback to someone that didn't agree with you and you actually still thought you were right?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes
So
we
there have been times that you gave feedback to people. They said, you know what, Jan, you're wrong, when you felt in your heart that you were right.
Yes, that has happened. It's
Do
happened.
you think
both
you were
ways.
egotistical in those situations, or were they just unwilling to?
I was not egotistical because I did not continue to press it, and I didn't take the attitude that they weren't ready, which is a little bit patronizing.
What do you think was the reason they said no then?
I can't think of a specific example. I think maybe I had misunderstood their situation, and I gave feedback that wasn't really helpful, despite my good intentions. None of us are omniscient.
I agree, none of us are omniscient, but I gave the specific question of a time that you gave feedback to someone that you thought was helpful, and then you returned on that and said you gave feedback that wasn't helpful. So how about a time, have you never had a situation where you gave someone feedback that you knew in your heart of hearts that it was helpful feedback, but they just didn't take that feedback? Are you saying 100% of the times that you gave feedback to people that you knew was good for them, they've always agreed with it and followed it?
I think that's a tough question for me to answer, because I think that over the years I've become less sure that I'm always right. Having good intentions doesn't mean you're right.
I'm not asking you for 100 examples. I'm asking you for one example.
I can't think off the top of my head. What I'm suggesting here is for some humility on the part of all of us well-meaning people, that we may give feedback that just, we don't understand their situation. Doesn't mean we're bad, doesn't mean they're wrong, doesn't mean they're not ready to receive it. We may just be missing the mark.
We might be, but if you believe you're hitting the mark and they don't give you a reason that you're not, it's fair of you to think that you're hitting the mark, and it's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person to think that you hit the mark and have them disagree. I think, like you said, as long as you're not pushing the idea on them and trying to force them into agreeing with you, you've done your part, right?
Oh yeah, I'm only advocating don't force the idea on someone if they seem to think about it and feel that it's not helpful to them.
Then we're saying the same thing. But I think it's okay to say that someone's not ready to learn something. I don't think that makes me egotistical to say I gave someone good feedback that would help them and they're not ready to agree with that yet. They may someday later in their life realize that that will actually help them, or maybe they won't, and that's fine too, right? But
Garrett, I really think that if we give feedback that the person, I think it's a little perilous to say they're not ready. What if the well-intended giver of feedback is simply wrong?
It could be, and I could be wrong, right? But ultimately, I should trust my own judgment about whether or not my feedback was right or wrong. I wouldn't give the feedback if I didn't think it would help them, right?
Yes.
And if when I give the feedback, and we're digressing a little too much on this, but if I give the feedback and they give me a good reason that I'm wrong, then I'm going to say, look, I was wrong, right? I have no problem with that. I'm not stuck on the feedback that I give, right? And no one should be, right? If someone has a good reason that the feedback they're given is wrong, then all right, the feedback was wrong, right? It's only if you're stuck on something when there's not a good logical reason for it that I think that someone is really wrong.
Well, I'll just make one final comment. I don't think the recipient of the feedback is really, I don't think it's incumbent upon them necessarily to defend themselves.
I mean, you're welcome. You're welcome to take it however you want, Jan. So thank you for your comments. I appreciate it.
Feedback is wrong.
I appreciate it. So I agree with you that we shouldn't force our ideas on others, but I think we should all listen with an open mind to the feedback people give us. So
Okay.
Katie, go ahead.
I do understand what you're saying, Garrett. I have come around to feedback that was given to me, and I often look at them with warmth because as you said it before, sometimes people can be angry with you at first. So
Yep.
it can be very altruistic because you're trying to improve them so that they have the relationships that they think they have. But so anyway, but I understand both points. That you could also give feedback that doesn't. People can give feedback that doesn't relate. But my point was I was gonna talk about, you give help and then receive, it builds your network and you receive help. I think John's point earlier, John Wong, I think he left. He was talking about San Francisco, where altruism isn't enough to help homeless people. And I agree with him on that one. I think part of the problem is not just that they're not going to benefit you back. It's like they can then harm you and become a huge public health hazard for the whole city. So I think it's important to understand what the situation is.
Yeah, I mean, when you say altruism is not enough, again, I tried to clarify with him, but I guess it wasn't clear for you. Like, altruism is not a solution to any social problem, other than to say that people's motives should be to help society. If their motives are to help society, then that's an altruistic motive. If we vote in place politicians who are altruistic, they will put in place social policies that will help the homeless because they know that that's good for society. And so altruism plays a part in there, but it is not a silver bullet or an end all be all to every social problem. You can't just say everybody is suddenly an altruist and all our social problems go away. There's a lot more to it than that. And I'm not trying to make that claim. I'm just saying, putting in positions of power people who have altruistic motives is probably a good thing to do. One, just out of curiosity, Katie, does that make sense to you or no? Because the other alternative would be to say, put in positions of power people who are selfish. And I hope that doesn't make sense to you. Sorry, I'm helping my daughter.
Yeah, that made sense. That was great.
Great, Angie, go ahead.
I think Will is next. Go ahead, Will.
Oh, sorry, I'm on my phone now, so I didn't see that. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello. Yeah, I was thinking of what the Dalai Lama said about, he said, if you want to be really, really selfish, just help other people, because it's the biggest bang for your buck, apparently. If you help someone else, you do feel good. So even if it's in little ways, if it seems to be really good bang for your buck. If you want to be selfish, just help other people because you'll get the biggest return for it. I'm thinking of, nobody's mentioned evolution and the fact that all of our behaviors, every single one of our behaviors, I challenge anyone to nominate one that's not, is a result of millions of years of mammalian selection, behavioral selection. And altruism is extremely important for social cohesion. And I think of the example of recently, I have a roof tile in my back garden. I don't know how it got there because I've got a tin roof, but go figure, as you Americans say, go figure. I've got a roof tile in the back garden, even though I've got a tin roof. Anyway, after much consternation and deliberation, I drew up a work plan and meditated on it. I decided to move the roof tile and put it in the waste recycling bin. And when I removed the roof tile, what was underneath was a city of ants, like 100, 200,000 tiny little ants. And they'd been there for as long as the roof tile had been there, which could have been years, as far as I know. And the roof had been lifted off, quite ironically, the roof had been lifted off their New York City.
Beg your pardon?
And so what happened was I'm going to have to mute you, Garrett. Anyway, half of them ran up my arm, and the other half immediately went and rescued the pupae, the little tiny larvae, and took them down into the turrets immediately in a split second. They didn't have a meeting, a health and safety meeting, or an evacuation plan wasn't put into place. Well, it was, but that evacuation plan was the result of millions and ants have been unevolved, they say, for about 1 billion years, or hundreds of millions of years. Unlike us, where we shared a common ancestor with pan troglodyte common chimpanzee from 6 million years ago, ants have remained unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. Anyway, the point is, it was altruism. The ones running up my arm were putting their life on the line to save for the greater good. Clear demonstration of selective behavior, of which we have as well. Some people have predisposition to altruism, inherited. Others are complete utter narcissists, couldn't care less about anyone else. Again, inherited. Do we have any choice about that? I'd say very little. And it's fascinating to consider that our altruism is born of selectionary processes which began millions and millions of years ago. So you wonder how much control we have over it, but it's very good for social cohesion. Right on 2 minutes. Look at that. Thank you very much, everyone. 2 minutes. Wow. Thank you.
So Will, it seemed like you're just assuming that altruism is deterministic, but I think you're a determinist, so you probably assume everything is deterministic, right?
No, I'm not a determinist. I'm just saying that I challenge anyone to nominate a behavior that hasn't been, is not the result of evolutionary selection. That's all. I'm not saying that it's completely cold-hearted, and but I'd say that it's a hereditable trait. Most of our behaviors and our personality types, our temperaments are also nature by nurture, about 50-50, hereditable. And it's fascinating to consider that altruism exists in many other species. It's selected for as coercive, and if you want to know, as conducive to survival. But if you want to know more about it, just read the Nobel Prize winning Edward O. Wilson, the sociologist who won the Nobel Prize, with his studies on insects. And he clearly documents sort of the emergence of sociological altruism and how beneficial it is. And also of interest is how groups compete within the group. So if you've got a group, say, of football players, they will compete against each other. But that's good for the group because that makes them stronger against an out-group. So this is why we're so competitive as well. We are competitive, even in these meetings. You see how much we're debating our ideas and we defend our positions vehemently. It's good because if we went up against another philosophy group, that's a good thing. It's a good virile environment. It makes us stronger. Anyway, it's all evolution, baby. It's all evolution.
That sounds like determinism to me.
Yeah, that sounds like determinism to me too.
I don't see how it's determinism as such.
When you say it's all evolution,
you're saying that there's no free will involved.
Yeah, saying that it's all evolution means that it's not at all free will.
Well, I'm not talking about free will. I'm talking about predisposition traits.
Predisposition,
but it doesn't preclude free will.
So
free will,
I think it does.
Well, that's a different debate. That's a completely
different debate, and we don't want to go down that rabbit
That's
hole.
right. Well, you started it.
I am because you made the point, I think, and this hopefully will get us to consensus. You made the point that maybe 50% of our behaviors are, evolutionarily based, but that means 50% of them are not evolutionarily based, which means 50% is free will and 50% is inclination based on evolution. I'm not disagreeing that our decisions are influenced by, nature and nurture. I'm just saying we are ultimately the decision makers, and we can decide what we want to decide, even if it's an unlikely decision. And I like to give the example of the guy with no arms and legs that decided to swim, and the guy can swim. He's got no arms, he's got no legs. Like, he probably would have been told from birth that he wasn't going to be able to swim, but the guy can swim. I mean, that blew my mind. That is a huge example of free will in action. But again, I am digressing. But I think if you agree that 50% of our
drowned last week, to be honest. But anyway,
what's that?
I think he drowned last week. I hate to advise you, but anyway,
I think you're kidding,
I
right?
think Angie wanted to jump in. She
Yeah.
used her emoji.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Thanks, Alice. I didn't see that.
No, I just want to say, and Will already touched on that, how in a pack the everybody competing, and I think that there is the selfish gene right there, where the alpha male will fight to have the right to pass on the gene. I think that's a selfish evolution there.
Yeah, don't get me started on the book, The Selfish Gene. That book's full of more holes than Swiss cheese. If anyone doesn't believe me and wants to pay my hourly rate, I'll write a good critique of it. But I do think genetics plays a part in our behavior. I'm not denying that, but The Selfish Gene was a terrible book, with all respect to Mr. Dawkins. David, go ahead.
I thought there was Clifford ahead of me.
I think
It's the other David
David is the next person that I see.
To Galloway.
I was
Sorry.
on my mobile phone before, and I didn't know which order it went on my mobile phone, so that's why I got the order wrong.
David Galloway is who you want, not me.
Yeah, David Galloway. Sorry.
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess I'm for altruism. I think in general, helping people, putting people ahead of yourself, I think there's definitely a time and place for that. But I do wonder, because I feel like this was being touched on before. Sometimes helping people, that's a very subjective idea. Like what my idea of helping people consists of. If I've known too many people who their idea of helping people is endless criticism. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. There's also the idea of, maybe sometimes you're at a job or you're in a relationship or something, and you're just constantly giving and giving and giving of yourself. And maybe, sometimes that putting someone before you is doing more harm than good. And I think the other David brought up earlier that sometimes maybe in our attempt to help somebody, we're enabling maybe behaviors or laziness or something akin to that. And if we don't help, we'll actually have to get it together. You know what I'm saying? So, I guess those are just a few critiques.
Yeah, I think this comes into like what Jan said, is like, just because someone gives a critique doesn't mean that they're accurate. People who are just criticizing everyone all the time, probably they're not super accurate in all of their criticisms, right? There's probably sometimes, if not most of the time, that they're off base. And in that regard, like, I think it's worth always listening to people with an open mind and an eye towards personal growth. And if this feedback is going to help you grow, no matter how it's given to you, consider listening to it. But if not, then, thank the person for their attempt to give you feedback and you move forward, right? And so I agree with you that there's a time and a place for everything. That's why, we held a session on giving and receiving feedback a long time ago, I think. And as part of now the members curriculum is how to effectively give and receive feedback, so that people know how to give feedback in a way that people will be more likely to be receptive to. Because I think there's an art to giving feedback, and I'm still not as good at it as I'd like to be, although I have the theory down, but actually doing it in practice takes a lot of practice. And so it is subjective, and that's why I ultimately came back to when I was talking with Jan about it, saying everyone has to trust their own judgment. The person getting the feedback has to trust their judgment about whether the feedback is going to help them grow, and the person giving them feedback has to trust their judgment about whether or not they think the feedback will help that person grow. And if both of them trust their own judgment and they disagree, well, then you both agree to disagree. And if they both agree, then cool, you've just added value to someone's life in a really positive way. And there's, like, who's right and wrong? Like, ultimately, we all reap what we sow, right? And if we're wrong about, not listening to someone's feedback, we're going to be the ones that suffer for it. So we ultimately have to learn to trust our own judgment. And that requires being brutally honest with ourselves about the feedback we receive, even if it's not given in the most polite way. And so, yeah, I guess I'm not disagreeing with anything you said, David, but maybe reiterating back my thoughts on it. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Sure. Angie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say up front that it is not my intention to argue or oppose this definition of altruism, but this is really thought-provoking. And so by this dictionary.com definition or altruism by the Cambridge Dictionary division, I hope you agree that nonprofit organization and open source software would be some examples of altruism.
Well, by the dictionary.com definition, I would agree with you. By the Oxford one, no, I wouldn't agree with you, because that definition is impossible to meet, because the very people creating not-for-profits and open source software get benefit from it, and therefore, you know, they're not considered altruists by the Cambridge definition. But I'll agree with you on the dictionary.com definition, if that's okay.
No problem. We'll go with that. Since I got you agree on that, if the opposite of altruism is selfishness, then by dictionary.com definition of altruism, the opposite of or the explanation for selfishness should be only that the benefits of the giver must outweigh the benefits of the receivers. And the example of this that I can think of would be for-profit organization or companies. We'll take, for example, financial service, giving you a loan. They make more money by giving you a loan, and you have to pay more than the service or the product that you actually buy, because you have to pay for the interest, right? I would argue that the financial company gets more benefit than you do, even though you get some kind of service or parts or product in return, but you have to work harder to pay more money. And if you are proposing that if you're proposing that altruism is not necessarily all negative, then I would propose that selfishness is not entirely negative as well, to be fair. Back to the spectrum that I think Basil proposed, and you somewhat agree to it. You know, if we are going to defend altruism, then I think it's fair to defend selfishness, because there's a spectrum in the middle. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was kind of two things. So let me try to address one at a time. The first one is, you said that, if I understood right, a not-for-profit that gives loans, let's say Kiva, for example, that gives microloans to people in third world countries, they're making money on the loan, therefore, and they're making, you know, I think you're saying because they're making money on the loan that they're getting more benefit than the person they're loaning money to. Is that what you were saying?
No, I'm saying that an example of selfishness, if we're giving nonprofit organization as an example of altruism, then an example of selfishness would be for-profit companies, such as financial company.
I mean, there are not-for-profits that are financial companies too. And so I guess I don't know that I would agree with that, in that I think there are very, you know, there's a whole category of B Corp companies that are, you know, social good companies that are intended to do more good. They just don't want to be limited by the restrictions of not-for-profits. And so my for-profit is intended to be a B Corp someday. I just can't afford to be a B Corp right now because we're too small. And I would argue my company is pretty altruistic. We're more generous than diners and restaurants, than anyone else in the industry. We are, you know, more beneficial from, you know, for both sides of the two-sided marketplace, because we're simply more generous. And so we're pretty much an altruistic company, but we're a for-profit company. And I think that's possible. It's just very much the exception. Most for-profits, I would agree with you, as a general rule, are doing what's in their best interest, the company's best interest, and paying employees the least amount they can get away with, and charging customers the most amount they can get away with. That's the typical mantra for today's business. But I don't think it has to be that way, or that all businesses are that way. And I also, you know, I do know of not-for-profits that give loans, like microloans, to people who would otherwise never get a loan. And the people taking those loans on get much more benefit than the interest they pay. So even the loan industry, there are examples that I can think of a loophole where, you know, the people getting loaned the money actually get more benefit than the one giving the loan. The loans are low interest loans, and the people getting the loan actually make a lot more money with the money they're loaned as long as they use it responsibly, which they usually do. Although interestingly, Kiva generally gives loans to women because they find that they spend the money more responsibly. So that was an interesting little statistic that I learned in researching them. The other thing that you said is that selfishness isn't entirely negative. I agree with you. I think if we're meeting our own basic needs, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're in the lower levels of the pyramid, like we have to meet our own needs first. You know, in some respects, if we're not meeting our own basic needs, we have to do whatever we need to do to get to the point where our own basic needs are met. If we're not getting enough sleep, food, clothing, shelter, you know, those basic things that we all need to survive, you know, we kind of have to take care of ourselves first. After we've met those basic needs, then I would argue self-actualization comes from helping others and from being, you know, having a positive influence on other people's lives. So I agree with you. I don't think selfishness is always bad, but I think that, you know, time and place for everything. Does that make sense, Kelly? Or Angie, sorry.
Yes, somewhat. It's
okay if you disagree. You're welcome to disagree. You don't have to.
Yeah, no, the topic here is about giving a light to altruism, which serves the topic and the purpose. I guess I'm just defending that if we're going to give altruism a second chance, we should give the same with selfishness. That's all.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of gave the example of where selfishness does make a lot of sense. I would argue that, like I made the argument earlier, and I won't make it again, is that, you know, the thing that benefits the self the most after we've met our basic needs is really being altruistic. I think it actually benefits the self more to help others and create positive relationships than it does to just focus on benefiting the self, benefiting the self, benefiting the self. Because who wants to be friends with that person that, you know, shows up to dinner, buys 10 glasses of wine and a filet mignon, and then says, let's split the bill evenly, to the, you know, the person at the end of the table who had a salad and no drinks. Like, that feels pretty unfair, right? And that selfish person who spent all that money and is trying to get other people to pay for it is not the same person that I want to go back to, you know, to dinner with over and over again. So
well, maybe we can elaborate on your example. So if I buy $250 of a bottle of red wine, and I want the rest of the party to pay up split the bill on the red wine.
So you drink it all yourself.
I drink mostly of myself, but the rest of the party drink a little bit of it, so they benefit less, but they get to try a 250 bottle of wine, right? But still, the benefit comes from me mostly.
Okay. So what's your question?
Put that in your calculus, Garrett.
There's the benefit for me, which I get to drink most of the wine, but there's also the benefit for others who get to try a 250 bottle of wine. They probably would never try that had they were alone, and if it wasn't for me on the table.
Well, it depends on how much they're paying for the bottle of wine. If they're paying for an equal portion of the bottle of wine as the person who drank most of it, I think they could afford to buy their own $250 bottle of wine if they wanted. So what I would argue is
I don't think so. I mean, it's splitting by fraction is always going to be smaller than paying the whole price by yourself. Yeah, but if you can
afford to buy a quarter of a $250 bottle of wine, you can afford to buy a $250 bottle. All I'm saying is, for me, like, what it should be is mutually agreeable. And if everybody mutually agreed to something, cool. Like, you mutually agreed to it. But you shouldn't buy a $250 bottle of wine and then, you know, expect other people to pay for it when you didn't get their agreement to pay for it in the first place. NJR, you wanted to make a comment?
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe they took the wine out of politeness, right? They could take it or leave it. They probably don't care. It's your thing.
And that's where I say it should be mutually agreeable. Like, as long as everybody agreed, yeah, we're splitting the check evenly at the beginning of dinner, then cool. Order the $250 bottle of wine. And if you wanted to pour it all for yourself, I hate to tell you, Angie, if you're going to order a $250 bottle of wine and you're going to drink 4 out of the 5 glasses and give the rest of us 1 glass, and no one else ordered other drinks, and you're going to tell us that we're going to split the bill evenly, I'm not going back to dinner with you again. So I'm going to vote with my feet. So, you know, like, everyone has the option to do that. And the truth is, you know, I have ended friendships over people who were just super greedy for a long period of time. And eventually I said, look, I'm not going to keep hanging out with this person because it just doesn't make sense anymore. And could I afford to? Yeah, I can afford to. It's not going to bankrupt me, but this person doesn't respect me. And they used to brag about how much money they made. And then they would show up to like potlucks with like, you know, I don't want to go into the details because I don't want to be able to, you know, rat out the person, but let's just say they show up being very cheap after bragging about how much money they made. And, you know, that's not the kind of person that I want to like spend a lot of time with. So
I hear you with that.
So Clifford, go ahead.
Garrett, thank you. With all due respect, you know, I found, you know, the discussion quite confusing, because we're talking about, you know, altruism without contextualizing it. So we are in a vacuum, vacillating from one point to the other, and it's hard to reach a conclusion without that, because, you know, it is a broad topic. So if we're talking about it in the context of societal, like, you know, what does it mean to be what it means to be an altruist in a societal context? So then we look at the ramifications as to what does that entail. In this, for instance, you know, when I'm listening you talking, Garrett, it seems to me that you seem to be talking more about cooperation than anything else.
So sorry, I'm just typing notes as I prepare to respond. So I guess you know, if it's hard to reach a conclusion, that means we're making you think hard, and that's kind of a good thing. That's really the purpose of these. It's not to teach that there's a right answer and a wrong answer.
No,
go ahead.
What I meant to say, Garrett, is like, you know, because because every one of us would have a different perspective about altruism.
Right.
So when you talk about, you know, putting someone's interest first, but you keep going back to giving feedback. To me, it seems you're equating it to altruism, to giving feedback.
No, not my intent at all. I think those were examples that other people gave about giving feedback. But I don't remember, to be honest. But I guess like the examples of like you know, like, you know, helping people, you know, volunteering your time at a homeless shelter is generally a pretty altruistic thing to do. There's lots of other things you could do with your time, but if you're volunteering at a homeless shelter, you're trying to help society and trying to help the homeless, and trying to decrease the cost of feeding the homeless so that they will have food and, you know, not end up in a position where they don't have things to eat. And so you know, that's the kind of stuff that we're generally talking about around altruism. I do think that, you know, when we talk about people that we have good relationships with, feedback is one of the ways that we can benefit other people, but it's just one of many ways that we can help other people. And so it wasn't intended to be the only way or put forth as the only way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But, you know, the thing is, you know, what my where I get, you know, a little bit, you know, confused, you know, is when we start diverging to different aspects of, you know, altruism. And to me, this is what am I getting from the discussion? This is a question I'm asking myself. Right. So where are we going? Are we trying to address, for instance, you to say, like, you know, altruism is not adequate in the society today. If that is the case, what else can we do to address the shortcomings? So when we're talking about, for instance, it seems that most of the comments, most of the examples seems to relate to personal interaction with others as opposed to the broader society at large. And that, when we're talking about the personal component, this is strictly relative, really.
So to answer your question, is altruism lacking in society today? I would argue that it is. I would argue that altruism is often vilified. And I tried to make a good argument that most people are probably altruists, at least some of the time, if not a lot of the time. But the idea of altruism is often vilified and strawmanned, quite frankly, with people saying, you can't be an altruist unless you get no joy out of helping other people. I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous. And I've had discussions with these people. I see Jan shaking her head, but I've had discussions with many people who make that argument. And that's their strong belief, is that you can't be an altruist unless you get no happiness from helping another human being, which is the definition that I said we're not going to use tonight because I find it a little bit silly and not a good use of our time. And so that said, you said that most of the examples relate to individuals, and then you said that it's strictly relative, but I didn't really understand what you meant by it's strictly relative. Can you explain that?
So by that, I meant to say, it is in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah. And that's where I say everybody has to come to their own conclusion, which is a core tenet of the Free Thinker Institute, which is why we're called the Free Thinker Institute, is that everyone should come to their own conclusion. We're not here to, we're here to give suggestions, right? And we can all give suggestions to each other, and everybody can take away from the conversation what they think is the right answer. And there doesn't have to be a consensus on, what the right answer is. And that's why, Clifford said, well, it's a little hard to reach a conclusion. Well, that's good. That means we're having a good conversation and that good points are being made on both sides. And now, it's meaning that it's more difficult to decide what's the right answer. And hopefully people are being more well informed of the pros and cons of what does it mean to be an altruist? What does it mean to, is altruism a good thing? Is it not a good thing? When is it a good thing? When is it not a good thing? And we're refining our beliefs by digging deeper into a subject. That's really what the community is all about, is about learning. And ultimately, I think each one of us has to decide what we have to decide what we believe truth is. And that's why the first intention is to be the best version of ourselves, to seek truth, not to find the truth. None of us has the answer of all the truths that exist. I joke with people who tell me that I'm wrong. I'm like, so far as I know, you were not appointed sole arbiter of objective truth. So I think I'm still entitled to my opinion. You're not allowed to say I'm wrong. You're allowed to say you disagree with me, which we're all allowed to say we disagree with each other. And that's fine. But ultimately, as long as we share our opinions and we have an open mind towards other people's opinions, then we get better informed. And, as long as we're seeking truth and trying to be the best version of ourselves and trying to be fair, I would argue we're going to end up in a better direction than we started. Does that make sense?
I completely agree with you on that point. Where I disagree with you, though, is on the basis, because the way that you define altruism from the dictionary, it is going to be dependent strictly on what you define as in the best interest of the individual that you're helping. So then, therefore, we're not talking about altruism. We're talking about something else. We may be talking about cooperation. We may be talking about helping someone. But altruism, putting someone's interests first, that should come from the needs should come from the individual, not from you. The individual should assess the needs, the person needs to determine what he or she wants. Then you can actually yourself determine what you can do to assist the individual. But if it starts from you first, are we talking about now altruism, putting someone in chest first?
So let's say you see a very thin person homeless on the streets. Would you assume that they would benefit from some food?
But first of all, you're making a lot of assumptions here.
I agree, but I'm just asking, like, is it a reasonable assumption to say, are you hungry? Like, would you like something to eat? Now, if they say, no, I really want a beer, like, cool, then they've changed your opinion. But I think if I see a very thin person on the streets, I think it's fair to ask them if they want some food.
No, that's wrong. That I
wrong?
would say is wrong.
So what would what do
you
if you walk up to a thin person on the streets? Do you say, would you like a beer? Like what do you say?
Well, first of all, I would not be asking the person. My question would be, do you want something? Can I help you with something?
Mm-hmm. I think
can I help you with something? Is there anything that I can do for you? If I suspect that you might need help, is there anything that I can do to help you?
I think that's
as opposed to assuming that you need food.
But what do you do about the people that don't see their blind spots, right? What do you do about the people that don't realize, right? What if you're at a cocktail party and, a guy walks up to a girl and just, says something sort of crude to her, and then she slaps him and he's like, God, what's wrong with her? What do you say to that guy?
Well, the thing is, I need to know the context.
I just gave you the context.
The context, the context that you
they both don't know each other. They're two total strangers at a cocktail party.
Right. So I noticed a slap.
Right.
Right. Now.
And you noticed him saying something crude to her.
Well, at that point, the guy is, well, it's hard to say.
It's hard to say. Is it so hard to say, Clifford?
Yeah. Yes. Why? Here's why I think it is hard for me personally to say something in there, because if I do not know how good friends they are.
I said they don't know each other. I said they don't know each other. I gave that data.
If they do not know each other and the guy is rude to her and then she slapped her, so therefore the girl is ready.
I mean, the guy said something crude to her and he said, what's wrong with her? So what do you do? Like, he clearly doesn't know that he was rude. Like, he thinks there was something wrong with her. So the guy needs a little bit of feedback. He needs to be told, look, man, what you just said, like, pretty much anyone I know would be offended by what you said. The way to give him that feedback is carefully, you have to do it carefully, because you need to do it in a way that's not going to shut him down to your opinion. And that's what our, in the members section of, how to give and receive feedback, there are ways to give feedback that will make someone more receptive. But some people are unaware of the feedback that they need. And this is where I'm going to disagree with Jan, I think, a little bit. And she may be mad at me for doing this, but I'm going to say sometimes people don't realize the feedback that they need to help them grow. And maybe they won't agree with your feedback, even if you give it in the most polite, respectful, and thoughtful way. And then I agree with Jan, where you back off and you say, look, I gave the guy the feedback. I said, hey, look, I think you're a great guy. I like you, and I think you had the best of intentions. You were trying to compliment that girl on her looks, but the thing that you said would have offended most of the women that I know. And so I would encourage you in a very polite way to give that feedback in a more respectful way than the way that it was perceived, because I don't think it was perceived the way that you meant it. And if you give someone feedback and I'm just trying to channel my how to give feedback in a more respectful way, then I think that person who may not be aware of the feedback that they need to hear might be more receptive to it. And sometimes we can give feedback to people, if we do it in the right way, we can give people the feedback that they need rather than the feedback that they think that they need. Because he thought what he needed was to be told that she was wrong, right? He thought he needed to hear that she was a horrible human being for not, wanting him to pick her up, right? And maybe that's not the feedback that he needed.
But I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
What makes you think that you needed to intervene in this situation to provide feedback? And second of all, what makes you think that the girl could have not done that herself?
Well, if I'm his best friend, let's suppose that I am, then I think that it's my job as being the best friend of someone who's being rude to help them be the best version of themselves and to be more fair. And so, yeah,
this is where I think this is where I think I have an issue with this approach, is the fact that you actually you're deciding what's good to do. But
so
the person,
if you see a guy on the street starting to shoot school children, you're going to say, oh, well, maybe that's perfectly acceptable life decision. He should be allowed to shoot school children. Like, I'm not going to actually try to stop him. I'm not going to try to convince him not to do it. I'm just going to say, you know what? Maybe that's a perfectly acceptable life decision.
This is no, we're talking. This is a
baseless
argument.
It's not that different of an example, Clifford.
This is a baseless argument because what I'm trying to say, my implicit actual question is that we do not know what is good. We don't always know what is the best way, what is the good thing to do. So in this situation, the first thing to do is to try to ascertain what's happening, what is happening, and then from that, understanding, using critical thinking actually to address the issue. Now, if we approach it from the standpoint that we always have to do something without really critically assessing the situation, this is why I think it is dangerous.
I agree with you. I think we do need to critically assess the situation. And I gave a scenario that I thought was pretty cut and dry. And when you balked at that, I gave a much more clear cut and dry example. And then you laughed at me and I'm like, hey, Clifford, like, give an answer, man. Like, you see a guy shooting school children. What do? You have a gun in front of you. Do you shoot him? I'm going to shoot that guy every time, like 100 times out of 100. I'm going to shoot him to try to stop him from shooting those school children.
Garrett, so I understand where you're coming from, but this example was so radical. So that you have to do something to prevent the act from happening in the situation, the school shooting. But in the girl situation, it's not that clear cut.
But I don't think it is always that clear cut. There was a bunch of policemen that stood outside of a school where that was happening and didn't go in and try to stop him. So, this is a real scenario where people didn't take action. And I don't know what they were talking about or thinking. Maybe they were going, hey, is it our job to go in there? Like, should we go in there? Like, who knows what they were thinking? But my point is that I agree with you, Clifford. If your point is that you need to assess the situation, which you said, I agree. Each one of us has to assess each situation and decide, does it make sense to give someone feedback? What's going on? What's right and wrong? Can I influence this situation for the better? And we have to use our own judgment. And all I would say is, yes, each one of us needs to assess the situation. We need to use our own judgment about what's going on and whether or not it's fair or unfair. And if it's unfair, I think we should use our influence to try to make things more fair.
Absolutely. Agree.
Cool. David, go ahead.
So you mentioned lack of conclusion may indicate a good discussion. But I would also add that a lack of conclusion may indicate a very vague word, altruism. I think there's words that are better, such as being helpful, much clearer. As soon as you talk about altruism, you're sort of, we're dragging the person's intentions into it. And, mind is it's hard to assess what's in somebody's mind and to include that in any kind of a equation. I like behavioralism because it's physical, it's obvious, it's so rather than use the word altruist or altruist, if you're an altruistic person or altruism itself, the noun, I think just being helpful to others is much clearer. Whether or not you're being helpful because you gain some good feelings or whether it's just you have to do it because that's your nature, and you don't really feel good about helping other people, but you're still helpful. The bottom line is you're behaving in a helpful way, which I don't think we would argue with. I think the trouble with altruism is it drags along this idea of the mindset of the person who's being helpful. And I think that's very vague. I think this is the reason we're not coming to a conclusion. I don't think it's because it's not a bad discussion, but I'm just saying altruism as a concept is an inherently problematic word. Thank you.
So David, I guess, I defined altruism in the beginning, and I guess,
Yeah.
It's about whose interests are on top. Is it the self or others? And, being helpful to others, I know you feel is more clear, but you could be helpful to others in a way that is more helpful to you than it is to everybody else combined. Or you could be, and where your primary motivation is to help yourself rather than to help others, but incidentally, it also helps others. Like the example earlier, where you buy a $250 bottle of wine, I drink 4 glasses of it, and I share 1 glass with the other 5 people at the table, and I ask them all to split it evenly with me. Well, I did help them all try a $250 bottle of wine, but I also made them all pay for my 4 glasses of wine. So yes, I help them, but that's not altruistic.
No, and any kind of calculus would say it's not being helpful either, because you had them pay equal amounts for much less of a sample. So, by any calculus, whether you call it helpful or whether you call it altruistic, that's a negative example. The fact that you have to kind of delineate one definition of altruism in one dictionary from another definition of altruism in another dictionary, right away, you're dealing with trouble. I just think altruism is it's just the connotations are just so convoluted and vague. You'll never get a room full of people, or even 3 or 4 people agreeing on what it really means. I think personally, that's what I think the problem is.
So do you think that the idea of putting other people's interests before yourself is hard to define? Is that what you're saying? So
no, I'd say if you call it, keep it simple. If you're helpful to others, I'd say then you're helpful to others, and that's you might say that's positive, but I would say helpful to others has much less problems than altruism as far as people agreeing what you mean. Sure, you might be helpful to others and you're also helping yourself, but the point is you're helpful to others, and whether or not you're more helpful to yourself while you're being helpful to others, that's a different calculation. Sure, you could argue maybe you're only helping others because you're also helping yourself, but people argue that about altruism as well. So you're no farther behind, and I'd say you're further ahead using helpful rather than altruism.
It sounds like a semantic distinction to me.
Well, I'm just saying altruism as a concept or a word is too foggy, too vague for anyone to agree what it means. So do away with it. I don't like using terms, especially in philosophical discussions, that are problematic in and of themselves. And I think altruism is one of them.
Interesting. I'd be curious to hear if people want to comment in the chat whether or not they understood what altruism, because we've talked about altruism all night, and I feel like I had from the examples that I had a pretty good sense of what is altruistic and what is not altruistic from the examples that we've given. But I'm curious if other people, Katie agreed with you, so I'm curious if other people feel like they have a clear view of what we were talking about, the definition of altruism that I used at the beginning, which is the principle or practice of unselfish concern for or devotion to the welfare of others, opposed to egoism. I'm curious whether or not that's ambiguous for everybody, or whether or not people are clear on it. If people want to add that to the comments, I'd just be curious for feedback.
I have an interesting, just quick one. An interesting idea would be, what do people think differs between helpful and altruism? And I think if people generally agree, being altruistic means helpful behavior. And in fact, you yourself have used the word helpful many times tonight. Yeah. I would say helpful keeps it simple. Altruism muddies the water.
I would argue helpful is more ambiguous, and that's why I was trying to like find, ways to shoot holes in the argument of helpful, because if you're going to say that they're tautological or like they're tied at the hip and they're both equivalent equivalent definitions, being helpful as being altruistic, then you're not getting anywhere by calling it helpful instead of altruistic. You're just saying, I would rather say the word helpful instead of altruistic, and that's a semantic distinction without a difference, if you will.
Well, no, I'm saying people, when they think of altruism, generally think of helpful. And if altruism also entails some vagueness that being helpful doesn't, helpful seems very concrete to me, much clearer, then altruism is a poorer term. It's not as good a term to use in a philosophical discussion. We spent this entire evening, people still are using the definition that you don't like from whatever Cambridge, I think it was.
Right.
Cambridge. Yeah, you don't like that definition, but people are all still using it because it's not very clear. It's a very,
because people use it in common parlance, David. So they're used to that being how altruism is discussed. And I'm trying to change the dialogue and say, guys, it doesn't make sense to use that definition. It's an irrational definition because it's impossible to meet. So let's not use that definition. Let's bring the conversation to where it should be and talk about what's relevant, because I would argue that we all benefit from actual altruism rather than the impossible to meet definition of altruism, which sort of vilifies good behavior, if you will, by saying that you're not an altruist unless you get no benefit, like including feeling good about it. That it's sort of
it's a problem.
Counterproductive.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. That's why the word, altruism is a huge problem. It's a bad word. It's just
and we just have different approaches. We both agree that it's a loaded word, David. We just have different approaches. My approach is to more clearly define what it is and what it isn't, and say why I think what it is that's a useful definition is good. Your way of dealing with it is to say it in different words, which I agree with your words. Being helpful is good, and I think we should all be helpful. And if you want to say it your way, I can say it your way when we're in conversation one-on-one. But for tonight, the topic was altruism, so I stuck with that. So that said, I'm going to go to Harry. Thank you, David, for your comments as always. Harry, how are you?
Yeah, good. I actually kind of agree with David that it's, and the reason being that you're trying to look at people's motivation, internal motivation, right? Which is impossible to know. So I sort of agree that helpful is, but Jose mentioned therapists, and I was thinking, and there was a lot of discussion about people's interactions with others and how they may be altruistic or not. But in our society, we pay lots of people that have tens of thousands of interactions with other people where they have to make very quick decisions about how they think this is what is the right thing to do. And the police were mentioned. I think about teachers a lot because I have a number in my family who have to make huge numbers of decisions and deal, especially grade school and high school, huge numbers of decisions in how they interact with those students. And of course, and Jose mentioned therapists, social workers, and the police, and there are, I'm sure, countless other professions. And so the question is, does altruism fit into, I heard a story about nurses leaving the profession because they're burned out. And I'm just wondering if there's some concept of altruism or helping that helps us to understand those professions more.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. And it's interesting because you're saying you agree with David, but I guess I'm kind of trying to deal with in tonight's talk, the situation you're talking about is that, I think a lot of people who are in the psychology profession can be burnt out because, and I think a lot of altruists in general, people who want to be altruists do get burnt out because they get told that they need to keep giving even though, and they shouldn't feel good about helping others, and they shouldn't need to feel good about helping. It's like this whole concept of that we should be held to this impossible standard of I should help other people, but I'm not a real altruist if I don't help other people without even feeling good. Like if I feel good about it, then I'm no longer an altruist. It's like that seems like nonsense to me. And so I think that that's the kind of mentality that burns out people who really are altruists, because they can't even acknowledge their own altruism because they're being told they're not real altruists, right? Because a real altruist wouldn't feel good about helping others, right? And that's the kind of thing that I want to combat, is to say that it's okay to feel good about helping others. If you are effectively helping others and trying to, that's a good thing to strive for. And, I think that's okay. And it's okay to feel good about yourself for trying to help others. That's a good thing. And it's something we should want in society more of, rather than vilify people who do it. Does that make sense, Harry?
Well, yeah. Again, I think that altruism word is problematic, because aren't you describing the psychology of helping?
I mean,
in other words,
you can call everything that I say is altruism. If you want to substitute that for helping others, cool, do that. Do that in your head every time I say altruism, because yes, according to David, that's what he says. And when I gave him a counterexample of what I think is, commonly would be passed as helping, but then we could have the same conversation that we're having tonight about helping others. And, I would make the same arguments that people make about altruists about helping others, like the one I did about the wine. Well, David says, well, that's not what I mean by helping others. Well, okay, then we have different definitions of what helping people means. Someone else in the conversation tonight said, well, you're helping the people by helping them try a $250 bottle of wine. Well, that wasn't what David meant by helping. So we just end up with the same conversation tipped over to like what helping others means versus what altruism is. That doesn't really move the needle in terms of the conversation, at the spirit of the conversation. It just, creates the same conversation about a different term. Does that make sense?
well, I think the only argument maybe was if you start talking, because because I think it's a healthy discussion, but there is maybe a more technical way to discuss the psychology of helping.
Well, you're welcome to introduce it, but now we're at the end of our session, but maybe introduce that in the online community and feel free to present it. I did the best I could. That's all I can say. So you're welcome to introduce that in the online community and we can continue the conversation there. And I'm going to let Jan go and then we'll have to close out because it's been a long day for me.
I just wanted to get my 2 cents in, so that's fine.
Yeah, no, thank you for doing that. Appreciate your comments. Jan.
Okay. Garrett, thank you. I'm having quite a different opinion of what you and I had disagreed about, because I think we had neither of us had defined the scope of the disagreement between the helper and the helpee. And I think now you're talking about if you see a person who's a good friend acting in a really offensive and even possibly menacing way to a woman, that you could give them feedback, and in fact, you probably should. And I think it's pretty clear if you see somebody acting in a way that, it's bad in all kinds of ways, and it's kind of confined to that moment, I think you should say something. So I agree with you there. I had thought we were talking about if it's something like giving advice to somebody what they should do about their troubled marriage or their kid using drugs or whatever, much more complicated things where you don't know the whole story. It's not just what you're seeing at that moment. And I think with the example you were talking about, Garrett, what you're seeing at that moment is somebody being mistreated, like at a party. I think a friend should say something, and they should listen to your feedback.
Cool. Thank you for that. And just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. We're going to kind of close out and, hope that everybody enjoyed the conversation. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for the really thoughtful comments, questions. Appreciate everybody's contributions. Would love to see people in the online community between these events on Tuesday evenings, and would love to see you guys next week. Ellis, do you know what next 2 weeks sessions are?
No, we don't have them up yet.
Oh, we really have to get those up more in advance.
Yeah.
So we'll work on that. So Thanks a lot, everybody, for coming, and we'll try to get the next couple of weeks sessions up sooner than later. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Bye, David. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good conversation.
Thank you. You too.